Hello, welcome to this video lesson on percents, something I enjoy teaching because they are so practical and they're actually pretty simple to deal with once you have a couple key concepts in your back pocket there. Please like this video if you find it helpful, subscribe for more math help, drop a comment to engage, and be sure to check out the many other videos that we have on the channel. Now, I wanted to start off with what are percents, and if you've watched some of my other videos where percents have come into play, you know I've defined this before. And while I'm not an English teacher, I am a big believer in the power of words. And if you know how to break down words and put them together, you're going to do better with your fluency. So the word percent literally means out of 100. And you can get there if you think about what CENT means. That literally means 100. And if you speak another language, especially a Romance language, so French or Spanish, then you know that the word for 100 in that language is something like cent in French or similar to it, okay, in some of the other languages. But you can also think of some other English words, such as the word century, and century represents 100 years. You might think of our money, okay? There are 100 cents, and you can even see the little C in the symbol for cents there, 100 cents in a dollar. All right, and so we don't have to go too far to connect the word there. And then per can just, you can think of it as per, so it's per 100 or out of 100. Now, what percents do for us is they give us this convenient way to compare numbers. We don't always have a sense of like the magnitude of numbers, especially when we're comparing them. And so if we can relate those numbers to something out of 100, it gives us just a better idea of how big the number is relative to another one. I'll give you an example. Suppose you're taking a quiz and you get 27 out of 35 points. Well, 35 is not a unit that we use a whole lot. So you might get a couple of assignments in a class that might be worth 35 points. And you know that you lost some points, but you might not know, like, well, how did I do on it though? I lost some points there. Well, what you can do is change that to a number out of 100. And that would give you a better idea of how you did. So if you can see that number out of 100, it just gives us this easier, convenient way to compare these numbers, like the 27 to the 35. And they come up in lots and lots of places. So percent problems come in three basic varieties. So if you boil down like all of your percent problems, there's essentially three numbers that are in play. Okay, and here's some examples. So here's one version. 14 is what percent of 35? And so this would be kind of like the one I just showed you up here, where you want to know what the percentage is. So what per 100? So 14 is what per 100 compared to like the 35. Be kind of like this. If you got 14 out of 35, what percent is that? 14 is what percent of 35? So that's one version. Another version is what is 20% of 60? So you go into a store, there's signs everywhere that say 20% off, and you go up and you look at your shirt, your pair of jeans, whatever you're looking at, $60, 20% off. What is the 20% off? What is 20% of 60? What's your discount going to be? And then 10 is 30% of what number? Now that is probably the least common variety, but this would be where you know the percentage and you know like the smaller of the two numbers and you're looking for the bigger of the two numbers, okay? So essentially in a percent problem, you're either looking for the percent, you're looking for that smaller number, or you're looking for the larger number. Now that's maybe a simplified version of it, so you can get problems where you might have to do an adding or subtracting as part of it. That would involve interpreting some of the context, but essentially those are the three varieties that you can see. You're looking for one of those three numbers. Now, whoa, I really thought there was another blurb on those, but Maybe it's over here. Okay, so with just a few key concepts, you can solve any of these variations. So how can we solve these? And I am not somebody who's really big on tricks. If you've watched any of my videos, I'm really big on a key concept, a mental model, a way of making sense of the numbers and the variables and what we're doing. And there's just a few key concepts that you can utilize, and you can solve any one of these variations. So you don't have to memorize 3 separate strategies like, okay, if it's this kind, then I set it up this way. If it's this kind, then, because you're going to forget all of that. And I have been doing these for forever, and I still go back to these concepts when I am conceptualizing and writing out my work. So what are these key concepts? The word of often means times, as in multiplication. Now, I don't want to say 100%. I said often because I have seen different contexts where the word of can mean something else, but it often means to multiply. So when you see the word of, a percent of, what percent of this, like that word of can be translated as multiplication. The word is often represents the equal sign. So like we don't say it too much here, at least I don't where I've taught, but you could say 2 plus 5 is 7, and you might hear somebody say the word is there instead of equals. So 2 plus 5 is 7. So the word is often represents that equal sign. And then the what often represents the unknown, that is, we'll call it the X, okay, because this is an algebra video on a math channel, so the unknown we'll call X, but you could call it P for percent or N for number, you put whatever you want in there, but we'll stick with X for this video. So the what is the thing that you're looking for, so it could be of what number, or what is, or what percent, and so with these 3 concepts, you can pretty much take any written description, so we can translate the written description into an equation, which we can then use our algebra skills to solve. And I said, I've been doing this since I was probably middle school age, and I'm way past middle school, like it's in the far past, and I still use these concepts when I'm going from a written description into an equation. So let's take a look at the 3 that I had up there before. 14 is what percent of 35? 14 is what percent of 35? So the quiz has 35 points on it. You get 14. Now, I hope you can estimate well enough to know that this is bad. Okay. You did not pass, okay, if you got a 14 out of 35, but you might want to know what percent did I get. I've had students that they didn't need to pass, they just needed to not have a 0. So let's go take a look at how this works. So the word is often translates to a equal sign. The word of often translates to multiplication. 14 is what percent? Well, the word percent means out of 100. So what percent? So what I'm picturing there is what out of 100? What out of 100? So 14 is what out of 100 of times 35. And there's our math equation. So I'm just going to copy it a little bit less spread out. Just kind of spread out there so I could put it underneath the words, but there's your math equation. And now you can just kick in your equation skills to solve it. And you can do this a couple different ways. So if you want to think of the 35 as being a fraction there, you can just multiply straight across. So this would be 35x over 100, multiply both sides by 100. To clear that, so this will give us 1400 equals 35x, because 100 divided by 100 is 1, and then divide by 35, and I think I have that one done out, but I'll divide it out again anyway, and we have 40, and so 40 is X. So it would be what percent of 35? It is 40%, which does make sense. Okay. I said you did not pass. Okay. So like 14, if you double it, would give you 28. So if it were out of 28, you would have gotten a 50%, and it wasn't out of 28. It was out of more than 28, which means you even had less than 50%. So that makes sense. So 40% does make sense. Let's look at the next one. What is 20% of 60? So remember that what is your variable, is your equal sign. 20%, we're going to convert it into 20 out of 100 times 60. And there are other ways to do that. Okay, so if I'm using my calculator, like my personal calculator, I'm probably not doing it this way. I can do it this way. I think this is a pretty rock solid way, especially if you've tended to bungle percents a little bit. That percent means out of 100. So 20% is 20 out of 100. And then we can go ahead and do that. So 20 divided by 100 is 0.2. And we're going to multiply that by 60. And well, let me finish this out. So what is 0.2 times 60? That's going to give us 12. So what is 20% of 60? So if you were going in the store, item was $60, sign says 20% off, you're going to get a $12 discount on that. Now, another way somebody might have taught you to do this is to do this. You got 20% of 60. That is the word of right there. And they told you divide this by 100 or move the decimal point. Okay. And then just do that. And that would also be correct. You can tell like we got there from here. Just sometimes people will say move the decimal point over, like move the decimal point to the left by 2, and then not explain why you're moving the decimal point to the left by 2. Well, you're moving it to the left by 2 because essentially you're dividing it by 100, because that's what percents are. Okay, and here's the last variation. This is the one that's not as common, but this strategy, these simple concepts will work for all of them. So 10 is 30%. We're going to list that 30 over 100 of what number? There we go. And so I can start, maybe you can multiply by 100 and then divide by 30, or you could do this out. You could do 30 divided by 100 is 0.3 times x, and then divide by 0.3. And that, I believe, is 33.3333333333, forever repeating. You could also work the algebra out this way. You could say, okay, I'm going to multiply those together to get 30x over 100. Then multiply both sides by 100, and then divide by 30, and you would land in the same spot. So whichever way you're comfortable working that out, depends on how quickly you want to get rid of the fraction there, I guess, but either way should work. And being able to do it more than one way would develop your number sense and your fluency. So those key concepts, is your equal sign, percent is the out of 100, of is your time sign, and the what represents the variable, will work for all of these and will stretch out beyond this kind of problem to other problems, maybe problems that involve some fractions. So really, really useful and very, very versatile, and will get you through all of your percent problems. So let's look at a couple of word problems. I am a fan of word problems, but maybe more narrowly, I'm a fan of application problems. There are word problems that are kind of stupid, quite frankly. So yeah, there are problems with words, but like nobody would ever do them in real life. I like the ones that are more real life, but sometimes we can't always get there in a math class. So all right, you need at least a 72% on the last quiz of the year to hold your B. So maybe you have an 81% or an 82%, and you don't need to get a B because you got a little bit of a cushion, but like you can't bomb the quiz because it'll bump you down into the C range. You have figured out that you need at least a 72% on the last quiz of the year to hold your B. Okay, so you won't drop below an 80. The quiz has 15 points on it. Out of the 15 points, how many do you need? Okay. And so you could think of it this way. What is 72% of 15? And it might require, some of these word problems might require that you just like rephrase it. So take your time with that. Okay, especially if English is not your first language. First of all, kudos to you for doing math in a language that is maybe not your most comfortable language. But even if English is your first language, sometimes it takes a little bit to decode this. The worst thing that can happen is that you're going to put your sentence together the wrong way, and you're going to end up with the wrong answer that you might be able to catch is the wrong answer if it doesn't make sense. So if it says, remember, you're looking at how many points you need on a 15-point quiz. If you get 70 as an answer, you can't get 70 points on a 15-point quiz. So that might be a tip off that you have done something wrong, like, ooh, I can't get this. And then you go back and revise. But let's translate this to an equation. So what is my x is 72 out of 100. That's what percent means. Of 15. I'm going to go ahead and divide 72 by 100, and that gives me 0.72 times 15. And I believe the answer to that is 10.8. And it is unlikely that you would get 10.8 points. Depends on how your teacher grades it. I have done weirder things where I've like broken down points and I'm like, I can't decide what to do with this kid. 10.8. But probably you're either going to get a 10 or an 11, but a 10 is not going to be quite high enough. So you need to aim for that 11, okay? You need to aim for the 11 points out of the 15. So that might help you out. You're looking at the questions and maybe there's 15 questions and they're 1 point each, and you're like, okay, I can only afford to miss 4 of these. All right, word problem number 2. You were looking at your expenses for the month and realize you spent $362 on groceries for the month. If your total income for the month was $3,700, what percent of your income was spent on groceries? So we know what percent. Okay, so we know we're looking for something out of 100 because I can see what percent. So what out of 100 of, this is my times of my income. Well, what was my income? Aha, 3,700, and is 362. Okay, let's just double check that. $362 is what percent of 3,700? Does that make sense? Money spent on groceries is what percent of total income? Money on groceries is what percent? Okay, sounds good. I'm going to start, how am I going to start this? I guess I'll go ahead and multiply straight across, and go ahead and divide that. So 3,700 divided by 100 is 37, and then divide by 37, and I have that. I did it out a completely different way when I did it earlier, so go figure that. But I arrived at the same answer, so that's good. So it's about 9.8% of your income you spent on groceries. Okay, and maybe that's great for budgeting purposes. Maybe you're looking at creating a budget and you want to get kind of an idea of how much am I spending so that you know how much to allocate. All kinds of reasons why you might want to do that. I used to have an app on my phone where I would track all of my stuff, and I didn't keep using it when I switched phones, but it was really neat. It would create like a pie graph and stuff, and it would show me all the different like things that I spent my money on, and you get to the end of the year and you can really get a sense of your spending habits. Not a bad idea. All right, please don't forget to like and subscribe. If you found this lesson helpful, drop a comment or question below, and check out the practice set for this lesson as well as other videos on the channel. I'll try to link that on this screen somewhere so you can click on over to that, and I hope I see you in the next video.